Welcome to Schweitzer Drive, a podcast where we explore what goes on between the generation of electricity and the light switch. Join Dave Whitehead as he interviews the entrepreneurs, innovators, and experts who are inventing the future of electric power.
Hi, I'm Dave Whitehead, the host of Schweitzer Drive, and today we're going to be discussing a topic that on the surface may not seem like a natural fit for a podcast about everything that takes place between the generation of electric power and the light switch. The topic is culture, specifically the culture within a company, organization, or business, and why developing a strong culture drives mission, values, and even quality. My guests today have developed their expertise on this topic through decades of working and building and leading teams throughout SEL. Both have played key roles in fostering SEL's culture, and both guests have been on the podcast before. First, I want to welcome back Tony Lee. Tony joined SEL in 1991 and has served in a variety of roles, including R&D Director of Transmission and Distribution, R&D Director of Power Systems, Vice President of Quality, Chief Manufacturing Officer, and Chief Research and Development Officer, and most recently as an SEL Distinguished Engineer. With more than 30 patents to his name, Tony's inventions are included in almost every single relay we've built today, as well as many other products. I'm also happy to welcome back David Costello, SEL's Chief Sales and Service Officer. David joined SEL in 1996 as a field application engineer and has also served in a variety of leadership roles, including Regional Service Manager, Technical Support Director, National Sales and Customer Service Director, and Senior Vice President of Sales and Customer Service. David has authored more than 30 technical papers and 25 application guides. Welcome, Tony and David.
Thanks for having us, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
It's great to have you guys back. All right, to kick off the conversation, Peter Drucker famously said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." What is culture, and why do you think a management expert like Drucker would place it above something as important as strategy? David, you want to take the first swing at that one?
I'll do my best, Dave. So I think to me, culture is about attitudes and behaviors that a group share or that define a group. And if you think about cultures of a region or a country or something like that, then those attitudes and behaviors also are something that get passed down from generation to generation. So if you think about attitudes and behaviors that define a group that get passed down from generation to generation, then it starts to make more sense how this applies to a company and what can set you apart. And I think it's more important than strategy or what we plan to do in any given year, because it's kind of like building a house to me. It's the foundation on which everything is built. So here at SEL, we've got our principles of operation. Those define our values, what's important to us, and our management principles. And then from there, everything gets built upon that.
Tony, what do you think?
So to me, culture is a collection of values, or values that we collect and that we list that are important to us, and then they guide our practices and our behaviors. So very similar to what David said. It's important, I think, to write that stuff down. David mentioned the principles of operation, and it's like he said, that's just a starting point for SEL culture. I think it's important to write it down. I think it's important for it to change slowly. From time to time, folks have asked Ed to add something to the principles of operation or modify, including me. I did. And he's kind of resisted that. And he does it after thinking about it carefully and saying, you know what, I think that what you just suggested is already in there. It's incorporated in these values, and, by combining them together. And I think it's really important to write that stuff down and have it be stationary so that we can rely on it.
So let's stick with the strategy and culture discussion. Is strategy, I can make an argument, is that, okay, these are the 5 things we're going to do to take that hill. Tony, you've been talking about writing down culture. Sometimes I think about culture is that it kind of covers the gaps where you can't write things down specifically to cover a particular situation or something like that, right? It's kind of the way you think about things, not necessarily go through a checklist fly a plane or execute a project or something like that. You wrote it down. I was also thinking, is this a nurture versus a nature kind of thing, or what do you think culture is?
Yeah, I think it definitely starts by writing down those values, but it's the behavior and the practices that those values spawn that are in concert with the things that you write down. Whether it's nature or nurture, our very good friend Mike Collum would say, "I can't teach you what your mama should have taught you."
Yeah,
right. And what that means is, if you're going to be a good person, then you got that from growing up probably with good people. And we're not here to teach you that part. So, and the parts of our culture and our values that align with that, hopefully they all do. Then yeah, that's not for us to teach.
So I think a good example of something that you're talking about, Dave, is in our principles of operation. There's a line that says it's as important to be a good customer as it is to be a good supplier. And one of the ways that Joey Nestegard and our chief financial and chief business officer takes that to heart, running an accounting group and paying our bills, and our accounts payable group is to pay our bills on time. So we pay our bills within 24 or 48 hours of getting those, and paying our bills within a certain time window isn't specifically dictated in our principles of operation, but that practice certainly comes from, in my mind, that one line that kind of says, treat people the way that you want to be treated and be a good customer as well as a good supplier. You mentioned earlier, Tony, something that triggered a memory with me. You said you got to start by writing this stuff down, the principles of operation for us, write our culture down. And there was a customer of ours in Singapore that once told me that when she saw our principles of operation document, she said she didn't really believe what was written in there. And her comment to me specifically was, anybody can write anything in a color glossy flyer. But then later she had, with a group from her utility, they had come to the United States. They had gone to a conference in Denver, and then they'd gone here to Pullman to do a factory tour. And talking to people, she saw basically principles in action. She saw people saying things and doing things that were in concert with, in line with what was written in the principles document. So that's what really twisted it. So that kind of gets back to your nature and nurture thing. She saw it wasn't just that it was written in a document. She saw that it was nurtured and in practice.
Hey, just for everybody listening too, if you go out to our website, you can find a copy of our principles of operation if you want to take a look at it. I know you guys have been referencing it, so if you're curious about what's in it, please head to our website. So this podcast is about everything that happens between generation and electric power and the light switch. How does culture fit into that? David, you want to take a swing?
Well, if it defines your attitudes and behaviors, then I think it has everything to do with how we view at SEL things like customer focus and creativity and quality and all of those things. All of us here at this table, we can point back to where it's documented, where that foundation is in our principles and our culture and our values. But it starts to get, when culture really is this living, breathing part of the company, then it really infects and directs every little action that we're doing. So the way you take care of a phone call, the way you build a product, the way you fix a problem once it happens, all of that stuff is coming from that culture.
When a hurricane hits David's part of the world, or a earthquake knocks out power, or a tornado knocks out power over a wide area, and all of the neighboring and sometimes very remote electric utilities send line crews to help get the power back on, I think that's a really strong part of the culture of the electric power industry. And so certainly that's culture that's important between generation and consumption of electric power.
Bringing it a little back to us, SEL's maintained a healthy growth rate of hiring folks right from the beginning, which certainly is great. But there are challenges that come with growth, like, retaining culture. Tony, I remember you talking about at one of our company meetings a few years back, where you mentioned that the level of growth that SEL is maintaining, that more than half of our employees had been with the company for less than 5 years at this particular moment in time when you were talking. How do you retain culture as your company grows and is expanding? It's certainly one of the things that I think about in the middle of the night when I wake up going, that's something we got to keep an eye on.
I think that's why we're here talking about this, really.
Yeah.
I mean, because, you see some things and you go, that's not what I would have expected. And then we start talking about it and, hey, let's talk about that on the podcast. It's a good topic. So yeah, we were going through some field offices recently, and we get a graph of their tenure at SEL, with the employee's name under it, and it's all plotted from most tenured to least tenured. And in every one of those offices that we visited, half the people had been at SEL less than 5 years.
Wow!
And so that's a perfect way to have your culture evaporate. If you don't teach it, if you don't reinforce it, if you haven't documented, the values from which your culture springs, and those folks with gray hair like us three are not teaching it to newer folks, it's going to go away. There's no way you can keep it if you don't teach it.
That brings us to a really, really important point. Is it's really, really hard work to maintain this. There's nothing magic that keeps it within the walls of the building. It's constant work and constant vigilance to reinforce it, hire the right people, reinforce it, teach it, nurture it, make sure it doesn't evaporate.
That COVID's been going on now we're going on 2 years, and lots of folks have done that work from home. SEL did it for a little while. We're certainly bringing folks back, and really one of the reasons I like it is certainly the collaboration and seeing people. But I think unless you're around people and talking to people, the culture it can go missing. And I'm concerned or interested, maybe is a better word, to see how this works out for other organizations that used to be together and now say, work from home, work from wherever. And what's that going to do to the company culture? I saw some statistics where, since we're at this 2-year mark, people have joined a company, never seen their team, if you will, face to face. It's only been through a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or something like that. And now have left the organization, right? And they had worked for a company and never, ever met any of their fellow employees face to face. It's baffling to me.
That makes a lot of news, and you see that a lot. There's the flip side, though, that I don't think gets as much attention. There's a company, Valero in Texas, an energy company, and they went back to work May or June of 2020. And one of the vice presidents there simply said that Valero's not a work from home culture. And he didn't mean it as a slam for people who are trying those things or using that as part of their whole process. But for them, it didn't work. And there were reasons why they wanted everybody together on this campus. Their headquarters are in San Antonio, where I live. And then there's other companies. One is a software supplier for us that made a big splash, a lot of news when originally they said they're going to go work from anywhere forever. And then the decision to rein that back in and come back together was done a little bit more quietly.
Yeah.
But some of the people that were meeting with us it was on a Teams meeting with us, but they related, they had just gotten back from their first big company meeting together, and they had decided that this whole concept of we've hired people and it's been a year, we've never been together, and this wasn't working as well as they thought. So they'd brought folks together. It reminds me of Ed's talk about, or the discussion about this term social distance.
And by the way, Ed, that's Ed Schweitzer, the founder of our company.
Yes, I'm sorry. Dr. Schweitzer likes to talk about, I guess the dislike for the term social distance. And we as human beings are pretty social creatures, and likes to talk more about physical distancing required to be safe, but not necessarily social distance, and even trying to find ways to bring us together socially, even when we have to be apart for things like pandemics.
We tried virtual happy hours, and those are kind of fun. I don't know if I'd want to do virtual happy hours for the rest of my life, but they work in a pinch. At SEL, we compete with a lot of other companies to hire the best and brightest talent available. And if you look at our engineering roles, there's a lot of competition for trying to hire those folks. You've both been involved with hiring over the years and have seen and maybe tried a lot of different approaches to recruiting. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you've seen that works best in terms of being, trying to find people that are good cultural fits and approaches that maybe don't work?
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started recording the podcast, and I think we both agreed that early in our career, we were too cognizant about hiring for technical fit, and we were less cognizant about the fact that being technically solid is part of SEL culture, and that even when we're looking for a good technical fit, we're really looking for a cultural fit. That's part of it. But then there's so many other parts that we need to really pay attention to. Engineering is our middle name, Schweitzer Engineering Labs. Yes, being technically solid is super important, but it's just part of the culture. It's not all of the culture. And I do think that we are more successful when we look at more than just technical fit. Certainly that has to be there, but we also have to look at everything else.
Yeah, I think as long as we start with people with regard to their technical ability, if they're smart, if they have aptitude and ability to learn and they're eager to learn, you kind of get those three. That's a perfect combination to really build on. And if somebody has that and a good foundation technically, I don't know that we ever look back 10 years later if they leave and say, yeah, that was the reason they left. It's almost always going back to some cultural misalignment or a values misalignment that we try to work really hard to find early on now.
Yeah, Tony, you made me think about our hiring process, which I haven't done an interview. I haven't been on an interview in a long time at another company. But I think our process, maybe just not unique, but it certainly helps with the cultural aspect, because there's obviously, if you're applying for an engineering job, there's the engineering interview part, can you code, can you design a circuit, what have you. But there's also other aspects of our interview process. We call it the social part, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm going to go out to dinner with you to see how you behave with perhaps your coworkers, how you treat the person that's serving you dinner that night. And it's all part of the interview process. And I've sat in, post interviews, and that when we bring along our HR people through, they're very important through the whole process, and people have been rejected because, it's not going to be a cultural fit. Smart person, but man, they were rude to the helper at the restaurant, or they treated the front person at the desk when they walked in rudely, or stuff you're just not going to pick up. It was strictly a technical interview.
Yeah, those are great ideas. The social setting, like a restaurant.
Yeah, it works well too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think another important thing is that when you're hiring as a team, that at least one person on the team has to be on the lookout for a team that gets too involved in the technical discussion and you just rat hole down some technical aspect and use up all time. And they need to bring the team back and say, somehow graciously start, investigating the social or the values fit aspect of the applicant. Because it's too easy. We've all done it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where you get this really, really smart, accomplished engineer, and you're just like so excited about the work they've done, and you want to learn all about it, and you want to teach them all about what you've done. And then you look up at the clock and the time's up. And we got to be careful about that.
And a lot of the questions are kind of similar to technical questions. You're looking for some kind of experience that somebody can demonstrate and articulate that shows you that they fit with our value of accountability or quality or serving customers.
How do you know when you've succeeded in building culture? I'm interested to hear how you guys answer that question.
Recently, in several emails and correspondence, I've seen a number of new employees specifically relate that the values and the culture of this company was the reason that they were attracted to join us. I think when you see that obviously called out over some of the more obvious, you had an office in the location I wanted to live, or the pay was great, or whatever. When that starts bubbling up to the top as the reason when people join, I think that's an obvious example that you're onto something.
Yep. And you get the same thing from customers when what they mention is, before they even mention our great products and our innovation and our great features, they start talking about the company culture. Then I think, you hit it out of the park, at least with that customer. You have to demonstrate it every time you talk to a customer, for sure.
I've been told, and I kind of think it's right, when by factors of 3 and 10, that when you're one person starting off by yourself and now you have 3 people, the company's a little bit different. When you get 10 people, it's, well, now I'm going to have to change some stuff. When you go to 30 people, it's a lot different than it was just 10 to 100. And so I'm going to, let's just take that as true. It's like companies change at these various sizes. You both have had organizations all over the certainly the country and to some degree, David, especially you, all over the world. How do you know culture is the same here in Pullman, where we're sitting, as it is in Australia or the Middle East or wherever else we have offices?
Well, one of the things that I love that we do, Dave, is we get out of our office and we go travel and we visit people. So obviously that's one of the problems with the pandemic and COVID that's put a damper on some of that the last year or so. But prior to that, and we're getting back to it now, but prior to that, we were traveling all around the world and poking our head into an office and staying for a few days and visiting. And it means a lot to folks. And it's a lot of miles and a lot of continents for us. And it's not easy. And maybe that's why not everybody does it. But, some of my favorite memories that relate to culture are like one that just bounced into my head is you walk into the office in Campinas, Brazil, and there's a poster on a wall. And it's got a really old-fashioned picture of a telephone. And in Portuguese, it translated to English, it says, "It's not a call, it's a customer," which is something we talk a lot about in sales and customer service, that calls coming in a switchboard or how many calls are answered. You can, or you look at, software programs or efficiency tools that people want to sell you to try to automate your customer service. And everything's referring to a call. And we like to spin that and talk about, no, it's actually a human being and a customer on the end of the line that can choose to do business with you over and over or not. Mm-hmm. And then when you walk into an office on another, in another continent, in another country, and that thing that's so important to us that ties back to our culture is there on the wall, translated into another language. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I agree. You have to go. I don't know how to do it without going to the places, talking to the people, seeing how they do business, seeing just something as simple as how is the office organized and staffed and run. It tells you a lot. Yeah. You can't do it from your office in Pullman. We've learned that sometimes the hard way, and sometimes like David says, when you go, you learn something that you take back home with you, right? It's a really valuable experience.
Well, we mentioned the pandemic a little bit, and it's certainly introduced some new challenges, as we discussed. How do you think companies can combat perhaps an evaporation of culture under these pandemic circumstances where people are coping with something, as serious as a pandemic? Not only do they have their jobs they have to do, but there's worries about, am I going to get sick, or my family member's going to get sick? And there's a hesitancy to stay away from the office or go in. Are there other things we can do to promote culture, I guess, besides being face to face? Or is culture one of those things that's really a personal, social way to teach and learn and share?
Yeah, there certainly are ways to help reinforce the culture. I think a couple of our organizations start every meeting with a values moment and a safety moment, right? Where they just review just one simple thought about our values and one simple thought about how to stay safe. We've all, I think, started using video conferencing, 100 times more than we used to. That certainly helps. None of that is going to replace, I think, the experience of working in a group with physical proximity to people, especially when you're talking about onboarding a new employee. You can show them the presentations and, give them all the literature and help them fill out the forms. And, you can do all of that remotely, but where they really onboard is a few weeks or months of working with people and seeing our values applied. It's not about just being introduced to them and, okay, here's your job and here's your desk and we'll see you on Teams.
To complement that, though, with the local leaders, the local teams, I think it's super important to do what you're mentioning with the onboarding that stretches out over time and everything's being demonstrated and it's experiential. At the same time, one of the cool things that we started doing a couple of years ago was making a really intentional effort to meet with every single new employee. For example, in my two divisions, every single new employee with hopefully the first day, but if schedules, get in the way, maybe within the first couple of days, but having a conversation with, the vice president's chief officer of the division within, that ideally that first day of being employed. And that's, in fairness, that's not something I would have been able to do live and in person anyway.
Sure.
With that many employees around the world, you can't be everywhere, but that is a cool tool that we're taking advantage of now. We can have a video conference and we spend, half an hour or more just talking and getting to know each other. And we answer questions about our principles or anything they'd like about the company. And most of the feedback we get about that is just, appreciation and disbelief that we'd spend the time to do that with everybody.
Let me clarify that, right? Just for folks that are listening too. David, who's our chief sales and customer service officer, you must have, I don't know, what do you have, 2,000?
1,500-ish in the company and a lot of people out.
You will take the time to call up a new employee in your organization. I think that is truly, truly, I bet there are very few other companies where the chief sales officer would be calling up a brand new employee within the first week or first day of them being on the job. And I think that right there, that seems sort of sets the tone for the culture, right? It really is personal.
Yeah, I think that's if you could summarize why we're doing it's to really, really reinforce what we're doing is important. And we talk about what we do and the importance of it. And we talk about our principles and you asked, when can you tell when your culture is really taking hold?
Yeah.
And, when you start getting little notes back after that, what seems to be a simple video conference or a phone call, and you get just a really gracious note back saying, "Hey, I can't believe, you spent the time to do that." And it's a shame that more companies don't, right? Yeah. I think that's Horst Schulze came and spoke to us a few years ago at one of our sales meetings, and he spoke to the importance of this kind of this window of opportunity that you have with a new employee to really set the tone and reinforce what you do and why it's so important, and get them kind of engaged in the mission of the company and the importance of it. So we took that to heart. I think we were doing a lot of the things the right way before that, but this phone call on day one was something that we learned from
I think that's
Mr.
pretty cool.
Schulze, and it's pretty cool.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for spending a little time with me talking about culture. I never thought when I graduated from college 30-ish years ago that I'd be on a podcast talking about culture.
A pod what?
Yeah, exactly. Where's my VHS cassette, right?
Or a wetcast, I guess.
No, none of us think of you as cultured either, Dave.
I appreciate that, I think. But anyway, thank you guys very much. Culture really, really is what makes a company, sets it apart from your competition, right? And ultimately, it's I think what has customers come back to you time and time again, right? You have to earn your customers, trust and loyalty in business every single day. And I think culture has a lot to do with it. It's probably the foundation of all of our business transactions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for stopping by Schweitzer Drive. Join us again as we learn about, explore, and celebrate electric power. For more information about the show, please visit selinc.com/Schweitzer Drive.